get right to Texas Congressman Jeb Hensarling, chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. He is joining us right now with some reaction. Good to see you, Congressman. Thanks very much for joining us. Your reaction to what we just heard from the president this morning.
Well, I'm encouraged. I mean, our allies need some blunt talk. I have been to NATO headquarters before, met with many of the representatives, but the bottom line is they haven't made their commitment, their 2% of GDP commitment, and the U.S. has been carrying the freight. And frankly, I think some blunt talk has been overdue. And so the proof will be in the pudding. We need to see what actually happens here. I mean, there have been some countries that have been moving towards their 2% goal, like Poland. I hope a whole lot others join because, again, the U.S. can't continue to carry the financial freight here.
So overall, how do you think the NATO summit went? How did the president do in your view?
Well, again, I think we have to see what actually happens. So, you know, the blunt talk is good, but I want to see what is the action that follows. So I hope what I heard from the president proves to be correct, that a number of these nations will indeed make their commitments. And I think NATO will be even stronger. And certainly I know that the president, the U.S., signed the communique that reaffirmed how important NATO is. NATO is very important. But at the same time, again, there has to be some blunt talk among friends, and friends have to keep their commitments. And if they do, it will be a very successful NATO summit.
Congressman, how are you? Robert Wolf, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Good. Two questions. One, can you just discuss the bill that took place on the floor last night of the House that was unanimous with respect to NATO? And then I'd just like to hear your take on the whole trade war and tariff situation with China, where we're discussing now a $200 billion tariff.
Well, again, there is very strong support for NATO in Congress, and from time to time, that needs to be reaffirmed. With respect to trade, listen, there's a lot of concern. I mean, there's no doubt about it that many Americans are enjoying the best economy of their lifetimes, and frankly, it's largely due courtesy to this administration. But at the same time, if we have a protracted global trade war, all of these economic gains can be reversed courtesy of the very same administration. And so, for example, we've got Secretary Mnuchin coming to testify before the House Financial Services Committee here in a couple of hours. And I think the administration needs to make clear several different points. Number one, you know, what is the end goal? I was very heartened to hear the president at the G7 say the goal was to actually bring down trade barriers. But if we look at the only treaty that has been signed since, I guess, these trade troubles began, Korea, well, that's not really what happened. Instead, what we saw was a quota on Korean steel exports. What we saw was an extension of a 25% quota on Korean trucks. So to me, the end goal ought to be for our country to be able to export more, not necessarily import less. And I continue to hear from employers in my little neck of the U.S., the 5th District of Texas. You know, a Dallas steel producer said she saw her costs go up 25%. She may have to lay off workers. The bottom line is the president's in a high-risk strategy here. I hope his strategy proves to be brilliant. But, you know, losing less is not the same as winning. I get it that our trade partners are more dependent upon exports. But again, losing less is not winning. We need a clarification what the end goal is. I don't think it has any credibility under Section 32 to say that foreign autos are a threat to U.S. national security. I drove to work today in an 11-year-old Honda Accord. I assure you it is not a threat to U.S. security, and the administration needs to drop that effort.
I want to keep talking about this because as the Secretary will testify before your committee today, it's dovetailing into this trade and tariffs issue. What would you like to see happen? I mean, China is now vowing to fight back in other than a dollar-for-dollar retaliation, but it's assuring that it will be, quote, firm and forceful. So if China is the issue, I mean, it sounds like you're more concerned with the aluminum and steel tariffs than the China issue. But how do you attack what China has been doing for so long, and that is, of course, theft of IP and the forced transfer of technology?
Well, the good news is, Maria, that both the Senate and the House has acted to modernize the CFIUS legislation that reviews foreign investment into the U.S. And as part of that, it improves.
But CFIUS can't decide, that a joint venture is not good. CFIUS can't even say to China, you can't move a company right next door to a military installation. So there are a lot of things that CFIUS can't do.
Well, that's wrong, Maria. If you look at the bills that have been drafted in both the House and the Senate, you will see that it has been modernized to include exactly what you were talking about with respect to territory being acquired next to U.S. military installations and other vital. So anyway, the House has passed a bill. The Senate has passed a bill.
What about the joint venture? It can't stop joint ventures, right? Or it can.
Well, indeed, there are new provisions to modernize it that deal with the minority, the non-passive minority interests. So that's the whole idea, is to be able to modernize the law and address these. And so you hit the most important point, and that is most of us believe China is the main problem here. And so it's the forced technology transfer. It's the forced IP transfer. And so as we just had this NATO summit, and let's face it, if you look, the membership of NATO is almost identical to the membership of the EU. I would just hope that the administration would work to first unite our allies against the common opponent of China, the serial violator of WTO, those that are, again, by hook and crook and any other measure, trying to take our technology, as opposed to necessarily picking a fight with the whole world at the same time.
Right, exactly.
So I would ask the Secretary to clarify, why are we seemingly entering into these trade wars with Canada and Mexico and the EU when shouldn't we all be focused in dealing with China? So I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear a clarification of the end goal.